Welcome to On the Ballot with Ballotpedia, where we connect people to politics by providing neutral, nonpartisan, and reliable information on our government, how it works, and where it's headed. I'm Jeff Pallett, and thanks for being with us. Today, I'm joined by Mish Saintil, one of the staff writers on our elections team who specializes in federal courts, which includes checking in on President Trump's judicial nominations. We've now passed the 100-day mark of his presidency, and following judicial nominations is something we've done here at Ballotpedia since we started in 2008. So, Mish, let's talk about judicial nominations and how President Trump's pace compares historically. So, Mish, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. It's been a while.
Always good to have you here. And you're right, it has been a while, been a little too long, but we're going to correct that today. And we're going to talk all about our favorite things to talk about judicial nominations, which you write about often in our Roe and Gavel newsletter. So, first things first, tell us a little bit about the judge that President Trump nominated recently. So, when we first talked about this show idea, there had not been any judicial nominations during this term yet. Of course, lo and behold, in the amount of time between when we came up with the idea and when we recorded, there has been a nomination. So, tell us about that, Mish.
Yeah, our timing was very lucky. On May 1st, President Trump announced that he would nominate Whitney Hermendorfer for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. This nomination comes a bit later than Trump's first nomination during his previous term. He nominated his first Article 3 judge, Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, on January 31st, 2017, 11 days after he took office.
Yeah, that's right. So, and let's just take a brief step back and remind our listeners Article 3 judges. There's a handful of different kinds of Article 3 judges. And what do we mean by those besides, of course, Supreme Court judges? So, what are the other Article 3 judges that are out there?
Over here at Ballotpedia, we consider the U.S. Court of Appeals, the Court of International Trade, and the district courts as kind of the Article 3 judges that we refer to. There's also the U.S. Court for the Federal Circuit. However, for our count purposes, we don't necessarily count that as Article 3, even though it is listed as an Article 3 court.
Yeah. So, for all intents and purposes, the number of judges that the media typically cares about, that sort of followers pay attention to, are really those appeals court, circuit court judges, and of course, SCOTUS when it comes about. So, obviously, so appointing judges was a really big priority of the first Trump administration. Remind us, how many nominations had President Trump made through his first 100 days of office in the first term?
Well, actually, this comes as a surprise to me as well, so while I was doing this research. But in the first 100 days of Trump's first term, he had only made two nominations: Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch and Judge Amul Dabar of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit.
Ah, okay. So now it's not really all that uncommon for presidents to sort of, you might say, pace their nominations during their terms in office. Is that right?
Absolutely not. In fact, if we do a comparison of Article 3 judicial nominations over time, going back as far as President Ronald Reagan, most presidents made few or no nominations their first 100 days in office. President Joe Biden announced 13 nominations his first 100 days. President Obama made three nominations, and President George W. Bush made no nominations.
Yeah, and there's so many factors that play into that. Does the president have an aligned Senate of the same party? Do they have other priorities that they're trying to get through? So, tell us a little bit more about the track records at this point in their tenure for the last few presidents, not named Trump, like President Biden, President Obama, President Bush, etc.
Well, as I mentioned before, we don't usually see a lot of action when it comes to federal judicial nominations within the first 100 days of a presidency, but both President Trump and Biden had a slow start and ended up appointing the most Article 3 judges in a first term since President Jimmy Carter. President Biden successfully appointed the most Article 3 judges with 235 appointments. A comparison of Article 3 judicial nominations over time since President Reagan shows that presidents made an average of 26 successful appointments by the end of their first year in office, 90 by the end of their second year, and 201 by the end of their third year. So it seems like the bulk of the appointments are made during the second and third years of the term.
Gotcha. So, if President Trump and President Biden both nominated quite a few number of judges, then it's all based on how many vacancies there are. So what are we expecting from here? Should listeners expect to see quite a bit of vacancies and a number of nominations, or are there any factors playing into the possibility that President Trump in this term might have fewer nominations than the prior two presidencies?
Well, there are currently 45 vacancies out of 870 active Article 3 judicial nominations, including the United States Court of Appeal for Federal Claims and the territorial courts. President Trump will have to nominate at least 46 out of 890 active federal judicial positions. We are also anticipating 15 additional vacancies in the future. For historical context, President Trump has inherited a relatively low number of vacancies compared to previous presidents, and definitely lower than he inherited during his first term. President Biden inherited 46 Article 3 vacancies at the beginning of his term. President Trump inherited 108 during his first term. President Obama inherited 54, and President Bill Clinton inherited 84 during his first term. Listeners should also keep an eye for President Trump's possible Supreme Court picks in the future. The median number of Supreme Court appointees is two. Two presidents, Reagan and Biden, made one appointment. Three presidents, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama, made two. One president, Trump, made three during his first term, and President George W. Bush did not appoint any SCOTUS justices his first term in office.
Fortunately, we will be closely monitoring the judicial nomination landscape, which we regularly publish in our monthly newsletter or in our monthly report, the judicial vacancy count, which tracks how many vacancies there are and what percentage of the judicial landscape is open, and gosh, all sorts of other things. What else is in that regular newsletter, Mij?
Well, shameless plug, but Robe and Gavel is a fine newsletter to sign up to. We include also information on Supreme Court cases. We have information, and we also go a little bit deeper into like the background of the courts, and we provide information on, things that maybe aren't that we wouldn't know right off the bat. Sort of like, what does it mean for the Supreme Court to reverse a case? What does it mean for them to remand a case? I love writing it every not every week, but periodically as we publish it, and it's a great newsletter. You guys should check it out.
Well, you love writing it, and I love reading it, and I enjoy digesting every time you publish it. And so it's great to have you on the show today. So, Mij, good to see you. We'll have to have you back on and talk SCOTUS sometime later this spring.
Thank you, Jeff. Always a pleasure.
And for our listeners, you can learn more about our judicial coverage at the link in our show notes. We'll be back later this week with another episode. Make sure you subscribe to On the Ballot wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Jeff Pallette, and thanks for listening.